As of the published date of this episode, I am an associate of Ulta Beauty. The ideas and thoughts represented here are my own and not that of my employer.
Welcome to the Scaling Emerging Beauty Podcast, a podcast that provides tactical insights and practical tips as you look to grow and scale your brand from 0 to 20 million in revenue. I am your host, Monique Benoit. I have experience buying at major retailers in the US, and I also have experience selling into those retailers. In this episode, I sit down with Janell Stephens, CEO and founder of Camille Rose Naturals. Here's a snippet from our conversation.
Went to the show, no one was there. And I'm like, oh my God, I packed up my car, packed up my kids, drove all these hours. One person happened to walk in my booth, and I guess he was bored too, because he was like, tell me about your product. I just started talking. By the end of that conversation, it was such a great conversation. He pulled out his business card. He was like, I'm going to buy you for Target. I would love to fly you up.
Let me tell you a little bit more about Janell. Janell started Camille Rose by formulating products in her kitchen back in 2010. And as you'll hear from today's conversation, she's since scaled the brand to have distribution across major retailers in the US, from the mass, drug, and specialty channels. Janell shares her story about how Camille Rose scaled their brand in the US, and she also talks about how she became a student of the retail business. This is one of those founder stories that is truly inspiring because it shows that you don't have to come from the industry, but you just need to be willing to listen, to be consistent, and you can surely grow your brand once you find that niche and you have great product. I'm really excited for y'all to hear the show, and we'll get into the episode after a word from this episode's sponsor. I'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsor for the Scaling Emerging Beauty Podcast, the Emerson Group. Through their support, we're able to continue to talk to industry experts to provide early stage brands with strategies and tactical insights on what they can do to help their business grow better. Thank you again to the Emerson Group for their continued support. And let's go ahead and continue with the show. So let's just get right into Camille Rose. Camille Rose has been around. I know folks might say, I see it in my local, Target or Ulta Beauty or, store. But you all have actually been around since circa 2010, something like that?
Well, 2011 is when I say Camille Rose was a legitimate business. 2010 is when I got into formulating products and researching ingredients and herbs and studying under an herbalist. That was around 2010. So I did that for a year. And then 2011 is when the website is going up. Let's share, my products.
So I'd love to talk a little bit more about that because I think these origin stories are always so fascinating to me. So consumers can find Camille Rose in so many retailers across the country, but there was a point when you weren't everywhere. To your point, you were in your kitchen, you were at home selling products. So take us back. I heard a fun story about you meeting a Target buyer and that being the catalyst to how you expanded, but I'd love for you to share in your own words. How did you start with DTC? I mean, it was very different in 2010 or 2011, right? Instagram wasn't really a thing. So just take us back and tell us that story.
Yeah. So the good thing about my journey is it happened organically. And it was at a point in my life where I really was not putting pressure on myself. I was in my discovery phase. Well, let me figure out who I am and the things that I love and what I want to do and what my passions are. When I think I tapped into that is when things just started, moving at a place that was natural for me and felt natural. So 2010, I was a new mom and my kids just started having different skin issues. And then they were also born with a bunch of curls. And so I am first of all, how do I help them, give them relief with their skin and their dryness? And it was bleeding type eczema. And I know that I'm loving their curls. Like, I don't want to put a chemical on it to alter it at all. Like, I want to live in a way and run my household in the most natural way possible. And that also included their diet and what I was feeding them, you know. So I think that was my whole quest for all things natural and the start of Camille Rose. I took that year, I found an herbalist out of California, and he started teaching me what herbs, the names of them, the benefits, the origin, and I became obsessed. And it was at that point where I'm like, okay, you know what? This product that says organic, it really isn't organic. It may have one organic ingredient in it. Well, I am going to formulate all my own products for me and my family. Still, I didn't have any intentions on selling it to anyone just yet, right? Once I started using it, I'm like, oh, I'm loving this. Oh, the results, I see it. And I wanted to share it with actually people who I felt like was in the similar situations that I was in.
I love that. I love that. And so many times products are founded because there's a problem and you just don't see the solution. And I do just want to remind the folks that are listening, in 2011, when Janell founded Camille Rose, there were not many natural hair products, especially I would say hair products catered towards textured hair. I mean, this is probably when you're first starting to see distribution for brands like Shea Moisture. I want to say Mael was probably around, but this is before, where now in 2024, there are a lot of textured hair care brands and many that are fulfilling a lot of needs. This is at a time when you probably couldn't go to your local big mass retailer and find anything for your children or yourself.
You could find them, but it wasn't as natural as I wanted it to be, you know, which was the whole purpose of me doing it myself, me doing it in the kitchen. I went on a quest for all things natural, which included foods, products that I used to clean my home with. Shout out to Camille Rose Home. And products that we used on our skin and our hair. So they were there. I was not satisfied with what I was finding on the shelf.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. So when did you move from selling it or using the products just on your children to, I think I'm going to sell it? Did you start selling at local farmers markets? Did you start selling to friends and family? How did that happen?
So I was giving to friends and family. And what I used to do was I would go to the grocery store and get like the glass mason jars and put the leave-in and put my products in those jars, give them away. They would come back for more, asking for more products once they would run out. And then I remember it was one, I made a diaper rash cream because, oh my God, one of my sons, the diaper rash, it was just all over. It was a lot. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to make a diaper rash cream, which I would write on scratches of pieces of paper and take it to a compounding pharmacist, give it to him and say, hey, can you make this for me? Like the diaper rash cream with these ingredients. And he was like, oh yeah. He would tube that up. I would use it on my baby. And when I tell you, the next day it was gone or almost gone. And so I remember telling my husband, okay, you have to come in and see this. This stuff is working so well. And so I was like, right there in my mind, I was like, I got to figure out how to help other moms, you know, like that. And so I just put up a website and I didn't know that the whole natural hair movement was going on in the world. My focus was like, okay, good ingredients, just products overall, because Camille Rose Skin is really where I started. And then from there, Camille Rose Hair, and then Camille Rose Home, my home products. And so I was like, oh, let me throw up a website. But Camille Rose Hair started moving like this. Yes, because I was like in a smaller town in Louisiana, so I didn't know like the New York girls was like on my site, right? Like on my site. And so on my social pages back then, I think it was like Facebook was hot back then. I was just posting on Facebook and they somehow found CamilleRose.com.
Wow. So interesting that you started with skin because that was the
Mm-hmm.
biggest need in your family and
Yeah.
where you saw that there was like a gap in the market based on your needs. But then hair was where people were like, oh, we like this stuff. And you saw
Hair.
that it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard a fun story about how you ended up meeting a buyer at Target. And that
Mm-hmm.
was kind of how Camille Rose went from just being DTC to
Big
being
box retailer.
kind of
Yeah.
big box retailer. So tell us that story about, how you got to Target stores.
Yeah, let me tell you something, Monique. Like formulating products, I became like, if I wasn't like tending to my kids, I was in that kitchen making something. Like it was so fun for me. I absolutely loved it. Like the kitchen chemist I was. I remember we were living in an apartment and I had like a big, huge pot of curl maker. I don't know what it was. It was some type of leave-in in the pot, kind of sitting on the floor. And the guy came in, some repair guy came in for the apartment. He was like, yeah, you making a cake? He thought I was like, I was making cakes, like I had this bakery going on or something. But I was really making products. I went to a beauty show like a year before and I was like, you know what, next year I'll be back here. And so I was making my products to go sell at this show. Well, I ended up packing everything up, labeling, bottling up everything, went to the show. No one was there. It was like not a lot of traffic at the show at all. And I'm like, oh my God, I packed up my car, packed up my kids, drove all these hours, and the show is boring. And one person happened to walk in my booth, and I guess he was bored too, because he was like, tell me about your products. And I just started talking. By the end of that conversation, it was such a great conversation. We just kind of connected and he pulled out his business card. He was like, oh, I'm going to buy you for Target. I would love to fly you up. And then I was like, wait, what? Oh my God, And yeah, he did that like months later, went to Target. I was so super scared, nervous because I'm like, what the world, and the rest was history.
Wow. So unassuming, a man approaches you to talk about your brand and then you find out this is a buyer at Target. I mean,
Yeah,
that statement, stay ready so that or like be ready so you don't have to get ready. I think it's something like that, right? Just you never
it
know who you're
is that.
talking to
You
though.
never know who you're talking to. The man had a different skin tone than I did. For a second, I could have been like, the product ain't for you, but I was like, you know
Right.
what? I'm going to tell you about something that I enjoy doing. And I guess he felt the passion in me. But yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I'd love to kind of shift a little bit and talk about mindset because the
Mm-hmm.
textured hair care category has had many entrants. Your brand is still thriving, is still doing well. But I'd love to understand from you, were there times when you had doubts and what you attribute your success to?
Listen, when my first year in Target, I was still handcrafting everything. So, did I have doubts or did I have some type of mental exhaustion because I'm trying to fulfill Target's orders by hand? It was like, oh my
That
God,
is
that
wild. I can't believe you were doing that.
for a solid year, made no money because I had to do everything, order all. It was like, oh geez, like yeah, it was a lot, but I got through
That's
that
not how you do mass distribution typically. So, but
at
kudos
all.
to you.
but but let me tell you what I feel that is, has the brand still surviving in this industry. And then back then, especially with being in a retail store, hand making everything. So when I went to that meeting, they offered me way more doors than I took. So I said, because I didn't know anything about how to get a manufacturer. I knew nothing about that, nothing about the industry at all. And I didn't want to set myself up for failure. So I'm like, I'll take 100 doors. And somehow I ended up with 107 doors. And I think that by me doing that and recognizing what I can handle, and by me not rushing, by me growing at a pace that I was comfortable with growing, I don't care what was happening around me and who was doing what and how many. I didn't even know, I had to learn. I was a student and I'm still a student in this business, but I had to learn everything. And that's even from the language of how to do business. I had just graduated from graduate school, so I had to go back to school. You know what I'm saying? And I was okay with that.
I say retail is a totally different type of business than any other business. I mean, you could have been a consultant. You could have been a chef. I mean, so many other things, but it's a different way of doing business. I mean, the terms are different.
Yeah.
The expectations in terms of how you communicate things, and then the variability. There's so many different things that can happen. I think retail is fun and exhilarating because of that, but it can also be very challenging because you might have a moment where items are supposed to ship, but a truck gets lost, a boatload gets lost, or there's a strike at the manufacturing plant. I mean, there's so many things, and then you have to figure it out and respond.
You have to figure it out. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
I love that though, that you had that almost that learning spirit and that humility. So I'm curious if you could go back to Janell of 2011 or 2012. What are some advice or some things that you would give Janell, especially if she was launching a beauty brand today?
I would say that I would have gotten more help sooner, at least one, like another Janell. I was so involved with everything. I'm going to do it myself. I got to, I had my hands in everything, the complete running of the business, which yes, you do need to do that, but you also will burn out and it's tiring, especially because, I have kids. And so I think bringing at least one person on that can be your right hand, that can kind of take some of the load off. Oh my God, it would help out a lot. So I would do that differently.
That's helpful. That's good to know. And then what about, you kind of talked about how there's so many things that you have to do as a founder and that burnout is real. How do you prioritize what's important? How do you know when you delegate things, when you do things yourself, especially given what you just said, you'd hire another Janell? I'd love to understand how you look at things in that way.
I think that right now I have a true realization that what's for the path that God put somebody else on, that's their path, and nothing could interfere with that. So definitely believe that I had to learn to trust other people and then allow other people, if that's their skill set, to do their job. It's kind of hard to step back and let go, right? Especially when it's something that is your baby, right? Like you were there from the beginning, like you put the work in. I'm a kitchen chemist, I'm self-taught, but it's okay to bring on a real chemist. You know what I'm saying? And so those type of things. And each department, allow them to do what they're supposed to do while you have your weekly check-in. So I think not just for me, I think any young entrepreneur that's starting out and was able to build a business successfully, it's kind of hard to peel those fingers back off of every department.
It's really hard too, because to your point, for many entrepreneurs, your business is your baby. It's something that you have put time, sweat,
Yeah. Oh,
money. And
yes.
so when you are letting go of something, it's almost like, and I've heard this from other founders where they'll say, I know I can do this really, really good. Like I can do it really well. Can you talk about letting go of things and being okay with other people doing things, maybe not to the standard that you would do them, but how do you kind of get okay with, okay, they're not doing it like how Janell would do it, but this is still okay?
Yeah. And that goes with allowing somebody to do their job, their skill set. Just, I mean, they don't have to walk the same path that I would walk to get something done, but at least it's getting done. At least it's producing results, right? Because if they're doing it and it's not positive, the end part is not positive, then that's a problem, you know? So just as long as the road that they took when they got there, it's producing, it's positive. You see the ROI, everything is all good, and then not, and this goes with my family too, because I found myself being judgy a little bit to like my sisters. You don't want to start a business, and people had to tell me, no, I don't want to start a business. I'm good with my job. I love my job. I want to go to work, go home, and then my mind is clear and free. I don't want to start no business. And so you have to be okay with how people do things differently. You have to be okay if people have different goals from you. You have to be okay with people loving right where they are. So I think all throughout my 20s and my mid 30s, I'm like, okay, it's a learning process that I have to, as an entrepreneur, I have to know that I have to adjust my mindset when others are around me, my family, even my kids, because you may find as a parent too that you're like extra hard on your kids, or you're expecting your kids to kind of live up to a standard that maybe you set for yourself, but that may not necessarily be for them. So just kind of realizing that and recognizing that, so that when I have other people around me, they're comfortable.
That's really good advice in life, because as an entrepreneur, you have to have so much ambition and optimism that I can also see how that excitement can kind of
be
it can,
overbearing.
yeah, like almost like
intimidating too.
Yeah, all of the above. And it's like, whoa, that's not what I asked for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so recognizing like, that's okay. We're both still doing the things that we're supposed to do, to your point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can also see how that helps you, even as you're leading your team, to say, what's this person's role? Are they still achieving the goals? It's a little bit different. But the goal is still, we still hit the target. We still did what we meant to do, what we intended to do. So it's okay if it's not done exactly the way that I would have done it.
Even with my friends, girl, I have a friend. It's so funny. A friend, she is an amazing cook. I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. You need to be a chef. You should do that. She's like, girl, I'm just cooking dinner for me. I don't want to be a chef. So,
right.
yeah.
Sometimes the number of times that folks will tell me, Monique, you'd be such a good beauty brand founder. And I say, look, I have talked to enough founders to know that life is not for me. I mean, maybe I joke and say, maybe when I'm 50, but I would have to have an idea for white space. And I'm like, it hasn't hit me. It hasn't hit me. So just because, you have that skill set, I do think there is something extra to that founder mindset where you have to want it, because you're going to face so many things that there has to be more in you than just the idea and the ability to get from point A to point B.
Yep.
So
mentally and physically, you're absolutely right.
Well, look, I feel like I asked a lot of questions, learned a lot about your journey as a founder and building up Camille Rose. I'd love to just close to say what or any other advice that you would give to early stage founders that are looking to scale their brand at big retail today.
I would tell them to take their time. I would tell them to consider their own e-commerce as a major retail store and put your everything there. first and then expand after that. But take your time to do so. Don't put any pressure on yourself. Don't try to think that you have to beat out your competition, because you don't. You have to work at a pace that you're comfortable working at, and just receive the blessings and enjoy the ride.
I love that. I love that. Oh, Janell, this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us, sharing your insights. Congratulations on building an amazing brand. It takes a lot. So thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Monique.
Thank you to Janell for joining me on the show today. I always love sitting down with founders and hearing their unique stories about how they were able to grow and scale their brand. There's not one way of doing things. So thank you again to Janell for coming on the show today. And thank you for listening to the episode. If you're still here and you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, please leave a review. It helps ensure that other people find the show. And if you're watching me on YouTube, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so that you can stay tuned for new updates. As always, I really appreciate you listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.